It is National Signing Day, not round one, but round two. Josh, this used to be like the signing day. Now with the early signing period, this is kind of where you put the bow on the 2024 class. And that's exactly what we're going to do on this episode of The Hard Count. Before we get to the whole introduction and what we're doing in this show, Josh, welcome. This is great to have you at the desk, man. This is a blast.
Yeah, it feels just like the On3 Recruits channel, but it's different. It's way different, and I'm just glad to be here.
Yeah, some very eerie similarities, but this is a blast, man. Yeah. We are kind of in the post-game, I suppose, of what would be the 2024 National Signing Day show we did over on the On3 Recruits channel, which if you haven't subscribed to that, would encourage you to do so right now. But what I want us to do here on this show is just kind of take an all-encompassing look and truly put like the finishing touches on our thoughts, our takes on the 2024 class. 2024
class. Helmets to the right, pads to the left.
Yep.
It is done. I know we've been talking so much 2025, but it's, I do miss the old style signing day where teams would kind of put together their class on signing day.
Sure.
But this is nice, too. It gives us a chance to kind of reflect. We get a little nostalgic about the class. We have a chance to actually, really appreciate what every team has. So this is a good day to take a break, to put the 2024 class to bed, and to turn the page to 2025.
Well, I mean, I think the big thing that a lot of people want to know coming out of National Signing Day and once all their top prospects put pen to paper, like, hey, how did we stack up? Because it's a competitive landscape, and how you win on the field obviously starts with how you win on the recruiting trail.
JD,
let's get right to it.
I run an On3 Recruits channel, and let me tell you, I truly believe that there are some fans of college football that would rather win a recruiting championship than they'll get more excited about that than winning a national championship. I don't necessarily understand that, but people are kind of crazy about recruiting.
I guess when you walk it out in principle, you're like, okay, well, I suppose they actually play games for 3 to 4 months of the season, but recruiting is a year-round thing. So if you're in it for the talking trash point of view, you talk trash more about recruiting than you would about the actual game.
It's an ego thing. It's like, hey, our program can land these kids. Your program can only land this caliber of recruit.
Yes.
And there's a lot of ego involved in following recruiting. That's what makes it fun.
Kind of a my house is nicer than your house kind of thing. Exactly. Don't worry about the neighborhood. Don't worry about what's inside. But on the outside looking in, the house is in fact nicer. Well, with that kind of being the preface to this whole thing, it is February 7th, 2024, the last one on the face of this planet, so we got to make it a great one. We got to make it the best one in history. Let's start with who won from this recruiting cycle. Josh, it feels like the most obvious place to start when we look at these On3 industry team recruiting rankings, the Georgia Bulldogs. I mean, top class. They had that locked up by last signing day. I mean, from Ryan Puglisi to Ellis Robinson. I mean, across the board, Georgia, the big dogs,
dogs
as
on
they
top.
Always do, man. As
dogs
they always do.
On top. Yes, they do it. And even with one of the biggest flips in the cycle, Dylan Raiola, flipping from Georgia to Nebraska, they're still on top. They didn't even waver. I mean, Alabama at a distant second, even with the absence of Dylan Raiola on that commit list. Georgia does it, but they do it in the trenches. They do it on the defensive line. They do it on the offensive line. We talked to Jake Rowe earlier today, and Jake just made a great point of it's not necessarily, I mean, yes, they do get great players, but they develop them as well. Physically and mentally, they learn the game, but they also truly do develop their bodies. I mean, they get guys with the biggest frame, so Georgia's already starting at an advantage, but what they do with those guys when they get on campus is where the real magic happens.
It's freakish, and we talked about it a little bit on yesterday's show. Like, I think Kirby Smart, what makes him so great outside of acquiring the great talent, I mean, their system they have in place to create buy-in for guys to say, okay, if I come to Georgia, whether I'm a 5-star, I'm a 3-star, whatever, if I buy into the way that Kirby Smart does things and I play scout team for 2 years, or heck, if in Carson Beck's situation, you wait your turn for 3 years. When you eventually get your chance, 1, you'll be ready, and then 2, you'll have the success you want to have on the field to go and win a lot of games and probably be a high NFL draft pick.
I have a sneaking suspicion that you're referring to a particular recruit in that class.
There is one in particular that I am thinking about. Is there?
I think there's one.
Go for it?
I say we say it at the same time. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Ryan Puglisi.
See, we're locked in, man. We've been on the air for 2 hours going on. I guess this will be our third hour.
But the reason why I know is one, because we talked to him, but the point in which we did sit down with them at the end of May for the On3 NIL Elite Series, it was days after Dylan Raiola committed to Georgia. And quarterbacks, hey, there's only one quarterback on the field at a time. So a lot of quarterbacks like to be that QB1, especially if you're an elite recruit, which Ryan Puglisi is. And we thought we were going to get a different tone when we sat down, because the big news, everybody's celebrating this Dylan Raiola to Georgia commitment, and Puglisi had been committed for 4 or 5 months at that time, but he really impressed us.
Yeah.
And you can certainly see how a program like Georgia must get recruits like him on their team to kind of build that, not just camaraderie, but the buy-in, what you were talking about.
And Rusty Mansell talked about that a little bit. Maybe it was a round table, maybe it was one of the shows over on the Dogs HQ channel, which get a membership there to keep you in the know for all things Georgia. But he likes to talk about the quarterback position as like, you have to have everybody in that huddle believe in you for you to be successful from an offensive play and offensive play out. And Ryan Puglisi, like you said, just sitting down and talking with the guy, like intense, all about ball. He's going to, I think, translate really well.
His belief in himself, his belief in the Georgia program. I think all of those things. The ability to compete. I think he believed in Kirby Smart's fairness when it comes to competition. Like, I don't think he knew, just because Dylan Raiola at the time was the #1 quarterback in America, that he was going to get the same shot at Georgia as Dylan Raiola was.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's obviously the top school, or at the top of the On3 industry team recruiting rankings. Let's go back to that top 10 right here, Josh. Yeah. Pick a school, any school within this top 10. Who's one of your winners from this cycle?
Oh, I think all the teams on here are winners, and I'll go real quick. Alabama, obviously a winner because they lose Nick Saban but still stay at #2. Ohio State swipes Julian Sain from Alabama. Very opportunistic take right there. Oregon in the top 4 because they landed Gatlin Bear over Michigan. I mean, the last uncommitted, unsigned 5-star in the class, Gatlin Bear, wide receiver out of Idaho, commits to Oregon over the national champion Michigan Wolverines. Miami at 5, they do it by flipping one of Florida State's top commitments, Armando Blunt from Miami Central High School. They launched themselves into the top 5. Texas signs an unbelievable class up and down, but I love the D-line. Colin Simmons is a part of this one. Ryan Wingo, they have some true stars. Xavier Filsaime was a late flip from Florida, adding him to the secondary with Kobe Black. They have one of the top secondaries in the country. LSU, pull that back up. I'm not done here. LSU at number 7. I love what they did. They had a chance at flipping Terry Bussey, but they do flip Dominic McKinley from the Aggies. They really took advantage of the Aggies coaching change. They flipped, off the top of my head, Gabrielle Relaford, Weston Davis, Dominic McKinley had a shot at flipping Terry Bussey today, but he ends up signing with Texas A&M. Auburn then there at 8, Oklahoma at 9, and then Florida. To see Florida in there at number 10. When you and I sat here and did the show, they were at number 16 after the early period and really had a rough day. They fell from 4 to 16 in a matter of days, and now they are back in the top 10 because of 2 short-term signees in Jameer Grimsley going from Bama to Florida, and also DeAndre Robinson. I said Texas had a great D-line class. They do. But they lost one. DeAndre Robinson, a 4-star, got out of his letter of intent after Texas lost their defensive line coach to LSU. And DeAndre Robinson chooses to stay in state with the Florida Gators. So I'm really impressed by all 10 of these programs.
All big. I mean, obviously all massive from an impact standpoint, from a point of view. Auburn at number 8 there. It said Miami, but I want to highlight number 8 Auburn in the sense that, like, in terms of what this meant for Hugh Freeze, this is kind of, in my mind at least, him making good on what you thought you were getting when Hugh Freeze became your head coach, because that was kind of the headline was, okay, great offensive mind, great recruiter, knows the SEC, and it's all well and good to talk about that in a press conference, and it reads real nice in a story when you hire the guy, but then to actually go out and do it in the SEC after you don't have the greatest season in the history of all seasons at Auburn. You know, they went 6-6, and so to take that momentum and say, hey, come be a part of what we're doing here at Auburn. You're going to catch the football if you're Cam Coleman. We'll put you in a position to succeed offensively. And to have a top 10 class right now, I think that was massive. And then what you said about Florida being at 10, Josh, we sat here on National Signing Day. It was bad vibes.
Yeah, bad vibes.
We were like, what's going on?
We're trying to keep it high, but like you couldn't ignore the elephant in the room, which was Florida was just having an awful day.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's kind of like a stock. You know, you can have an awful day and still be on a good trajectory, and Florida just had an awful day, but they rebounded. Top 10 class for Billy Napier, very important. Touch back on Auburn for a second. Yeah, it's a great class. You want a great class.
Yep.
Don't get me wrong. You want to hire a coach like Hugh Freeze that can come in and build a great class. But we already know, JD, the SEC comes with expectations.
Yep.
And the only way to raise those expectations even higher is to bring in all these 5-star wide receivers and still not have a quarterback.
Yeah. Yeah, you got to win, baby. Got to find a way.
So it's great that he got an influx of talent because you need it.
Yep.
But it's all got to come together because that window with the expectations, that window closes very quick. Like there's a lot of hope, there's a lot of excitement around that Hugh Freeze program after year one, but you got to win on the field in the SEC. You're not going to get the same pass from fans and recruits if you're not winning in year 2, year 3 under Hugh Freeze. So it's imperative that they get out there and do it, but they did land several guys that will help this season on the football field.
I was going back through to see their 2023 class. They did land Hank Brown in 2023 from Lipscomb Academy here in Nashville. He's at Auburn, so that could be a guy going forward. And then also with Hugh Freeze, like you got to imagine with his pedigree and his background with quarterbacks, like the transfer portal you feel like will always be an option for Auburn. So we'll see if they do it spring football.
Yeah, we're in a much better place to find a quick fix because, hey, 5, 6, 10 years ago, if you're Hugh Freeze and you just brought this class in, you really are working with what you got.
Yep.
Like there is no transfer portal 5 years ago, 10 years ago. There is no idea of like, hey, we can lure this guy who's not doing, not starting. Everybody had to wait their turn back then. But now it can be a quick fix.
Absolutely. Yeah, and Auburn, I think, is in a really interesting spot here in the next couple of years with the portal, how they've attacked it previously. They had, at the last check, they had acquired 9 individuals through the transfer portal so far, but I'm curious if they're going to be in the mix there in that second spring window of the transfer portal.
Well, they'll have to be.
Have to be, right? Have to be. Got to be on offense all the time. Speaking of offense, speaking of the Gators, we talked about the vibes that were a little bit lackluster on the first signing day. They've since risen into the top 10 on this signing day, but you know who signed on the first signing day is DJ Lagway. And that was massive. And I want to talk a little bit about quarterback.
And at the time, he wasn't our number 1 QB.
He wasn't. He is now. And he, at that point in time, I think was only given the billing from Charles Power of best senior season. I mean, he did numbers like Good Will Hunting his senior year.
Yeah, he went absolutely
crazy.
Nuts.
Went absolutely
Won
crazy.
Gator Player of the Year, or Gatorade. He's also Gator Player of the Year.
Yeah, heck yeah.
But
I hope he's Gator
he
Player of the
also
Year.
won Gatorade Player of the Year. And it was one of these deals where I'd been anticipating it because, like, talking to Charles throughout the summer, he was kind of pushing me in that direction that DJ Lagway would end up number 1. He just wanted to see his senior year and fully believed that he would come through. Every Saturday morning that I woke up and I checked DJ Lagway's stat sheet, it was like a crooked number 7 for touchdowns, like 7,
crazy.
6, 4 in the first half, like numbers like that.
I like that. Crooked number. I like that.
Crazy. Just crazy stats, but not just 1 week, like every week. He was doing that every week, throwing the football, and he looks really good. I mean, he looks physically developed. We see a lot of these quarterbacks come through that are 6'4", 190, and you're like, oh yeah, great frame, gonna look good in college. But DJ Lagway steps into Gainesville with the frame and the ability to, they got Graham Mertz, they're set for this year. Graham Mertz had a good season last year. I think he'll build on that. So it's ideal. I think it's ideal situation for him to walk in.
100%. And he's already enrolled, so he's going to kind of get comfortable and learn how to be a college student, figure out where classes are. How do you, get from A to B, from workouts to where you got to go for study hall? Like, there's so much thrown at you. That's why I love the fact that he's already enrolled and going to have a chance to sit behind Graham Mertz. We had Nick De La Torre on the On3 Roundtable. I want to say it was somewhere around a week or two ago, as soon as DJ Lagway was announced as the top quarterback in 2024 in those final rankings. And he said, I don't see any reason to redshirt the guy. I know Graham Mertz is our guy this year. There's not a quarterback competition, but with as good an athlete as DJ Lagway is, with his size and what he brings from a running standpoint, we could see him get in the game a little bit here, if not garbage time, maybe situationally.
Yeah, because if he's as good as we think he is, then he's not going to be there for that 4th year anyway.
Yeah.
Regardless, even if he does sit out in redshirt, you might as well just get him in as much as you can his freshman year, hand him the reins in year 2, let him have at it year 3, and he's probably, if he is what we think he is, then he's probably gone after that anyway. So yeah.
Hey, let him cook, right?
Yep.
That's what I can say. Let him cook. Let
just
DJ
let it
Lagway
simmer
cook a little bit
for the first year, and then let him cook.
Let him really sizzle there. Let's say in the Sunshine State, though, Luke Kromenhoek, one of the final 5 stars, he was given the best upside or most upside from Charles Power for his quarterback superlatives from this class. And during the signing day show, he's like, I want to make sure I put a qualifier on this as well, developmental upside. I mean, the best quarterback prospect they've signed in Tallahassee since Jameis Winston, he won a pretty nice trophy out there, I believe, the Heisman as well as a national championship trophy in Tallahassee. I mean, this is massive for Florida State to have their quarterback of the future under Mike Norvell.
Yeah, the only thing he needs to do is change his last name to start with a W. then he's guaranteed Heisman winner because you have Ward, Wenke, and Winston.
And Womenhawk.
Now you need Womenhawk. Luke Cromenhawk, I agree with Charles for giving him the highest upside because of his story and where he comes from. Florida State offered him a scholarship before he started a varsity game. He committed to Florida State before he started a varsity game. So Florida State was on board with him. They watched him, and then look at I mean, it's incredible. If you're a Florida State coach, you gotta really pat yourself on the back because he finishes as a 5-star recruit, and at the time had not taken a snap at the time that they accepted his commitment as a starting quarterback. So obviously, Luke Cromenhawk out of Savannah, Georgia, he has all the tools, right? He has the size. He just needs a little bit more experience under his belt. So you can see why Charles designated him as the top upside.
Josh, I got to take for you here on Florida State. I don't know if Mike Norvell gets enough credit nationally for what he does with quarterbacks. I mean, Jordan Travis, he went into Mike Norvell's office and is like, hey, should I play receiver? And Mike Norvell's like, nope, calm down. Like, you're going to get it. Just hang with us. And then also Brady White, when he was at Memphis, Brady White was a really high-profile guy coming out of, I believe it was like the 2015 class in California. And he bounced around, I think, a little bit, ended up at Memphis, ended up having a pretty solid career under Mike Norvell. And so now DJ Uyunglele, I guess, is the next quarterback in line. But Luke Cromenhawk being of a 5-star, variety, another notch in the belt for Mike Norvell. I mean, I think he deserves more credit with the quarterbacks. Fair?
Yeah, in terms of development, absolutely. I mean, there was times where Jordan Travis, like you said, didn't know if he had a role on the team. Like he was not feeling confident about himself as a quarterback. They had early on in that tenure, they had to talk him into staying on the team.
Yeah,
like not transferring. Like I think he was just going to hang it up in general. And goes on to be one of the most exciting quarterbacks that we've seen in the last couple of years. So Mike Norvell will have a blast developing Luke Cromenhawk.
Well, here's another one I like from the superlatives. So the new NCAA video game's coming out. Mm-hmm. And by nature of this game, supposedly coming out soon, I think we'll get to play with Nebraska and Dylan Raiola. Charles has him as the best deep ball thrower of this whole class. That means I'm playing with Nebraska. I'm dialing up 4 verts. We're going air raid. What do you think about that? Dylan Raiola, best deep ball thrower. Tons of ability, right?
Absolutely has a missile launcher for an arm. I mean, he was throwing them out because remember, he played at Buford High School. So he had KJ Bolden running routes for him. And I don't think he could overthrow KJ Bolden. I mean,
that's true.
They were hooking up nonstop. It was really exciting to watch. So, I think Dylan Raiola is going to bring some sort of excitement to that Nebraska offense. Much needed.
I mean, he is, for a lot of people's money, like he is the perceived savior of Nebraska football. And that's not necessarily like fair to put on a true freshman, but I do think there's something to be said for, okay, you have this enormously high-profile quarterback coming to Lincoln under a new coach. It's this perceived new era. Like, he is the guy to put Nebraska football back on the map. And the thing that I like about him, Josh, I think he welcomes that. Like, I don't think Dylan Raiola is walking into this thing just trying to get Instagram likes and trying to, get some clout. Like, I think he genuinely is signed up for the mission of, okay, I am the guy. It's on my shoulders. It's on me to bring Nebraska back to at least bowl eligibility. And I'm sure they have much more than that in mind.
And that's what you want. That's what you need. I mean, there's been others that have gone to Lincoln, Nebraska with the intention of turning this thing around.
Sure.
Now it's Dylan Raiola turn. And
yes,
I like it.
I cut you off.
No, I like it. I mean, I was going to say, I'll bet on Dylan Raiola.
It's kind of like, you ever read like King Arthur in Excalibur, the one who's going to pull it out of the, like, Dylan Raiola is trying to pull the bowl eligibility Excalibur
There's been dozens and dozens of other men that have tried and failed, and now it is your turn.
Dude, how awesome would that be?
Are you the one?
Awesome. I'd be all for it. I'd be all about it. But best deep ball thrower. Let's see. Let's get to a little Julian Sayin action.
Okay, what's he at?
Formerly Alabama. Now he was formerly signed with Alabama. Yeah. Transfer portal, short-term signee, whatever kind of verbiage you want to put to it. He's in Columbus. He is Charles Power's most accurate quarterback of this cycle.
So Dylan Raiola had the missile launcher. Julian Sayin. That would be a combo. Julian Sayin has the rocket launcher with the heat-seeking missile on it, and I like that for Ohio State because they have all the talent in the world at wide receiver. So it's just like, hey, get them the ball. Just get them the ball. Like, you don't need a launcher. It can be right here. It could be here. It could be here. Yeah. But just get them the ball, and that's what Julian Sayin's going to do. You don't want to call him a game manager because he's not that at all, but he's going to go in there and manage that offense, and I think he's going to do it at a really high capability.
I mean, the fact that he's going to Ohio State with how stacked that quarterback room is, that just, again, going back to like the competitive makeup
Bama
of
was stacked
guys,
too. I mean,
Bama was also stacked.
It's not like they were empty there. So
I love it.
I don't think it was a competition. I don't think he left because of competition. Like, I don't think he left because Ohio State needs me and Alabama doesn't. Like, I think he's a great quarterback, and he committed to a school 3,000 miles away to play for Nick Saban.
Yeah, I mean, if we're being real, I love the fact that he's not. Because, I mean, I think in today's day and age with the portal, if a guy isn't, the top player in the class, or if there's another quarterback in his class, he's like, maybe I'll decommit, maybe I'll transfer, maybe I'll this.
If the coaches can do it anytime they want to do it, then the players should be able to do it whenever they want to do it.
And Julian's saying, I mean, he's standing on business. He's like, I'll play at Bama, I'll play at Ohio State, I don't care who's in the quarterback room. If you will have me, I'm betting on my most accurate arm in this class per Charles Power, and we'll be about it.
Because we really also like Air Nolan.
Yes,
I mean, he's out of Langston Hughes.
100%.
He's a winner. He puts up video game type numbers as well, and he's not backing down from competition either. So that Ohio State quarterback room's loaded.
I love it. One more to get to here, Ryan Puglisi, who we talked about a little bit before. Charles, when we talked about this with him, sort of gave a little smirk to us. He is his biggest gunslinger in this class. And then we asked Charles, like, how do you even like deduce who this is? Because you're not looking at stats. Are you looking at who's just uncorking it? Who's saying YOLO twice?
I think you got to look at haircut.
You got to look at haircut.
Like the flow. Does he have flow?
Absolutely.
Is it nice? I think you got to look at everything. Swagger. Just he's a bulldog in every sense of the term. He's a bulldog, and that's why he's a gunslinger.
How do you feel about your quarterback if he's do you want your quarterback to be a gunslinger in the Josh Newberg offense? Will you take the gunslinger, or do you want the guy who's a little bit more prototypical, kind of that 6'5" NFL pro?
I think in the college level, you want a player that can make his own plays. Like, you want, we just talked about a Jordan Travis, but those guys that like a Drake May and a Sam Howell, to me, those are gunslingers. When we're talking about the true definition of the term, guys that are not afraid to put the ball through a tight window because they need the yards. They're not looking for the check down. They're looking for the first down. They're looking for the touchdown. And Ryan Puglisi, from what we've seen, fits that bill.
And I think to kind of put a exclamation mark on this whole segment, like in modern college football, it is becoming less and less of a want to have someone who's a dual threat quarterback who can create their own plays, who can be, a gunslinger, so to speak. I think it's more of a need. Like, I mean, you look
or you're at a deficiency if you don't have
100%. I mean, you look at the college football playoff this past season, all four of those quarterbacks, I thought, had some mobile ability to them. Not that they were all running quarterbacks, like Quinn Ewers lost weight so he could create more plays. Jalen Milroe, I mean, his play speaks for itself. J.J. McCarthy, Michael Penix Jr. early in his career was kind of a dual threat. So I think that's something now in college football, just like what you said, you have to be able to create your own plays. If you don't have that, you're kind of on the outside looking in of where modern college football is.
Or just go
headed.
play for Georgia where you have the big front, and you can just sit back there like Carson Beck. But I think at this point, you're at a disadvantage if you're a coach that is not playing with a dual threat quarterback.
Without question.
It's just the offenses that are run. And also, as quarterback, I mean, we don't see many senior quarterbacks anymore. So if you want to play a freshman, hey, take some of that production off of them through the air and let them run it.
Yeah, without question. Without question. Well, I mean, that's the quarterbacks, and they will all obviously have an impact. You got Julian Sayin there in the Bama gear, but those are the superlatives. If you change that shade of red a little bit, you can almost see him in the Buckeye gear a little bit, but those are the superlatives from Charles Power, who does tremendous work for us here at On3, Director of Scouting and Rankings, and was in for the On3 National Signing Day show on the Recruits channel. Josh, let's move on here to the players that will be catching the football from those guys. Because this,
some good ones
this cycle, I mean, it's fair to call it the year of the wide receiver. Yeah. I don't think that's a stretch from Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman, TJ Moore, Ryan Williams, who reclassified and joined the party.
Who was the #1 wide receiver in the 2025 class. And is now under consideration. But of course, Jeremiah Smith are number 1, Cam Coleman are number 2, Ryan Williams are number 3. But like Charles Powers said, in any, not any other year, but in some years, TJ Moore is the number 1 wide receiver in the country.
Yeah. And I mean, I was going to ask you first, as someone who like eats, sleeps, and breathes recruiting, like how does a year like this compare to other years? Charles Powers throwing out the 2008 year with Julio Jones and AJ Green. I mean, is that a fair call?
I mean, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. But some years it's a running back year. Some years it's an offensive tackle year. Some years there's 3 generational edges. This year it happens to be there's 3 or 4 number 1 wide receivers, but only one can be number 1. And Jeremiah Smith separated himself from a group of number 1s to be a true elite number 1. Unbelievable. A lot of drama with this one behind the scenes. I don't know if people know, but like Hayes Fawcett had a Miami graphic ready to go just in case for Jeremiah Smith.
No, okay.
So there was
inside baseball there.
And that was kind of some of the delay. You know, there was a delay in his NLI being sent in. He had the ceremony, but then 4 hours later, Ohio State is still not sending it in. Was he thinking about things? But at the end of the day, he's an Ohio State Buckeye. They have an unbelievable class, but you really can't miss if you're a team that signed Cam Coleman, if you signed TJ Moore, if you signed Ryan Williams. Look, you got a number 1 wide receiver in terms of the expectation of once they get on campus and they develop, these guys are bona fide number 1s.
What I thought was crazy was when we did the signing day show, I keep referring back to that because there was just so many good conversations had. But Charles Powers is like, listen, we hear it on 3. We were a little bit ahead of the curve on Marvin Harrison Jr., which one is just funny because it's like, Marvin Harrison, yeah, you know him, his kid, yeah, he ended up being pretty good at football. Crazy how that works. But Jeremiah Smith, he said, is further along than Marvin Harrison Jr. was at that point in time. Like the folks that are tuned in live that aren't listening to this later on podcast, if you're watching the video feed, like it's just poetry in motion. That is a dude that is 6'3", 210, 215, can line up all over the field. Like it's going to be next to impossible, you have to believe, to keep him off the field as a true freshman.
Oh, absolutely. And speaking of outliers, Charles Power, Cam Coleman was an on-3 outlier early in the cycle. This time last year, on-3 had Cam Coleman ranked way higher than the rest of the industry. If you're Charles Power, you got to love to see that because now he's an industry 5-star, meaning he's a 5-star plus, meaning every ranking service in the industry has him as a 5-star. So unbelievable call by Charles Power. Now, he never outranked Jeremiah Smith, but Cam Coleman has been on our radar for a while, and I'm really excited to see what he can do at Auburn.
For a hot minute. See, I like this, that we sit here and kind of talk the cash for Charles. Because he wouldn't do it.
He would never
toot his own horn, but like we're here to do it for him.
No, I will toot his horn, Paul.
Yeah, absolutely. So go check out that whole conversation on the On The Recruits channel, that whole show on the On The Recruits channel.
Really fun.
A lot of fun.
Great
a lot
insight
of good stuff
from Charles.
I kind of want to mix and mash here because those guys, obviously, instant impact guys. I did not arrange this with our producer, Nick Brake, so we'll kind of just talk this through of guys that are going to have an impact. We can keep the year at the wide receiver, lower third up. There's a couple of guys, though. Ellis Robinson was one of his instant impact freshmen. Going to play, in Charles's mind at least, will compete to play. He's already having some buzz early on in Athens during winter workouts. Like, that was a guy who's also of a very high-profile recruit that you expect to compete early at Georgia. Like, that's tough to do.
He'll go and play.
That's tough to do.
Yeah, he transferred. He was from the Northeast. He transferred to IMG Academy, played his final 2 seasons there, and I truly think, playing at a program like IMG, it's the closest thing day in, day out that you're going to get to the college level. Couple that with the fact that Ellis Robinson is already on campus. I mean, where else can you get that type of experience other than IMG Academy where you're living away from home, not just playing for a really good football team, but you're living away from home. You have tutors. It's a college simulation.
Without question.
On multiple levels. So Ellis Robinson, even though he's going into a very good and loaded defensive secondary, he'll have an opportunity to compete for a starting job.
Without question. TJ Moore, I don't believe he was on Charles's instant impact freshman for the list that he gave us, but expect him. And that year in the wide receiver vein, I probably expect him to be a guy. Jordan Seaton, one of the top offensive tackles in this cycle. He'll probably play right away.
Another IMG Academy standout. Yeah. I mean, Jordan Seaton, we were high on him. When IMG played their first game in Nashville. So Charles Power got to go see him live in person, game 1. Was already high on him, but needed to kind of reshape his body and just dial in a few things. And Game 1, senior season, Jordan Seaton stuck out like a sore thumb, rose up the rankings, finishes at our third-ranked offensive tackle in the country, industry #1, but the crown jewel of Coach Prime's class. I mean, Coach Prime was out there begging for offensive linemen after the season ended, and for good reason. And then what does he do? He just goes out and lands the number 3 ranked offensive tackle in America. And yes, of course, he's going to play right away. Whether it's left tackle, whether it's right tackle, whether it's guard, it doesn't matter. He's going to contribute at Colorado in some form.
You got to protect Shooter Sanders. Like, it has to happen. And I think the other thing, too, like, you can't teach big. 6 foot, 295. That's pretty big. That'll do just fine. And he'll get acclimated, obviously, but I'm excited to watch him in Boulder. And according to Charles Power, we'll see him probably play sooner rather than later.
What do you think of Jordan Marshall filling in for Blake Corum? Or they're just very similar backs.
Yeah, one thing Charles said that I thought was interesting was the way that he's able to be an asset in the pass game. Like young running backs, if you want to get on the field and have a role early, be able to be a third down back, be able to pass protect, that's first. But second, be able to be an asset where they can line you up if you go empty, be able to catch a little swing route, be able to be a guy in the screen game. Like, the more you can do, because everybody can carry the mail at that level. But for Jordan Marshall to be as developed as he is in the pass catching side of things and to be an asset early for Michigan to go along with Donovan Edwards, I think that's the rich getting richer at that point.
And obviously. He's a gym rat. And we know he'll fit right in there at Michigan.
Yeah, they got a few gym rats over there in Ann Arbor. They got a few of those. Well, like I said, this is the 2024 class, and we're sort of closing the chapter on it, putting a nice little bow on it. Again, Josh Newberg's got recruiting year-round coverage for you on the On Through Recruits channel.
But I'm ready to put 24 to bed.
There. 24, night, no alarm clock.
Because I really want to talk 25, but it's hard. It's like how hard can we go on 2025 when we still have this little bit of a chapter to finish here in this book? You know, you can't start another book before you. Well, at least me, I can't.
No, I can't. That's too much. Well, how about this? Let's put on the swim trunks and let's dive head first into 2025.
All right.
What do you say? Let's get to it. I mean, it's very, very early, but let's kind of just unpack some of these headlines. And as with any recruiting class, as with any college football story, you got to start with the quarterbacks, right? Yeah. Bryce Underwood's committed.
Wait, tell me which one you want to talk about.
You know, let's talk that one right there. Let's talk Bryce Underwood. Okay. For those that are tuned in live and understand the visual of that, if you're on podcast, I apologize, but we're looking at a lower third of Julian Lewis and Bryce Underwood. Let's talk some Bryce Underwood, Josh. What do you say?
Yeah, Bryce Underwood. So for those tuning in right now, the #1 prospect in America, the #1 recruit in the 2025 cycle, and the #1 QB is committed to LSU. But he's from Belleville, Michigan, and picked the Tigers over the Wolverines and Alabama. Took a visit to Colorado as well. Can't forget them. But chose LSU over Michigan in a year where the hometown team wins the national championship. And you know, the writing was really on the wall with he took a flurry of visits in the spring and into the fall to LSU in succession, whereas he did not visit Michigan during the season until December. Literally one of the final weekends before the dead period hit in the early signing period, he finally made it to campus. But at that point, LSU already had the lead. They were trending. I had already put my prediction in for LSU, and he made his commitment on January 6th to the LSU Tigers, giving the Tigers the #1 class in America. They now have the #1 QB. LSU has the #1 wide receiver in DeCorian Moore. They have the #1 running back in Harlan Berry, and the #1 safety in America, Pickett, is considering them.
Ooh, okay, so it's heating up.
They are stacking #1s. It's unbelievable. LSU off to a great start. If you're just tuning in to 2025 recruiting, the #1 QB is off the board, and he is committed to LSU. You see it. Look at DeCorian Moore, the #4 player overall. He's committed to LSU. Harlan Berry, the #12 player overall. He's committed to LSU. I told you, DJ Pickett, the #1 safety in America. He has a great relationship with Corey Raymond, who just went back to LSU. This LSU class is something serious. We know Georgia's about to turn up. We know Ohio State's going to turn up. Sure. We know some of these others are about to get it really cranking, but LSU is the team right now that has all the momentum.
And the thing that's interesting, Josh, like you look back, like let's turn back the clock 10 years ago. And LSU is this team that's physical, and we would always say, like, man, if they could just get a quarterback, if they could just get it right offensively, they would be nasty. And I mean, since that era, you've had Joe Burrow under a different staff, obviously, but I mean, he and that offense, they were historic. You have to imagine that helped the LSU brand.
But recruits still associate that with the program.
Totally saw that. So, and then you had Jaden Daniels this past year with the Heisman Trophy, and Malik Neighbors is going to be probably a first-round draft pick. And so you have that, image living in the mind of these recruits. And I have to imagine that plays, I don't know how big a factor, but at least some small factor in landing a guy like a Bryce Underwood, and then the top receiver and running back in this class so far. Like, it's becoming an offensive school, not an offensive school, but a school that can recruit the offensive side as well as the defensive side. And that's kind of changing their brand in some ways, Josh.
And hey, it's coming soon, because next year, this time, Bryce Underwood will be enrolled.
That's crazy.
I want to say LSU.
Yeah. You would think.
But I know Michigan's going to double back. Like, there's going to be a moment, and I'm not saying he's going to flip. I'm not saying – well, what I am saying is there's going to be a moment where Michigan makes another run at him.
I think it's malpractice if you don't, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
you have to, like you say, recruit through the whistle.
Yeah.
Recruit through the whistle.
Now we recruit through the next play because of the short-term signee rule. I don't know when you stop recruiting.
You got to keep recruiting. ABC, always be recruiting. That's kind of the name of the game in college football. Speaking of always be recruiting, and speaking of quarterbacks sticking with commitments or maybe going elsewhere, let's move to the other side of that lower third. How am I doing this? Yeah, there, right there. Boom. Julian Lewis, committed to USC. Since his commitment has reclassified to 2025, fresh off a visit to Georgia. That's obviously the in-state school for him. Where do you think stand with him? And I mean, what's the latest in your mind with Julian Lewis?
It's gotten very real with Julian Lewis for the reasons that I just said. He was a 2026 prospect about a month ago. And if you're sitting here as a 2026 prospect, you're thinking, I got time.
Yeah.
This thing's fun. I'm going to enjoy the process. I'm committed to USC. Then he reclassifies to 2025, just recently, about 2 or 3 weeks ago. And then it sets in what I just said. You realize that 1 year from now, this time next year, Julian Lewis will be enrolled.
That's crazy.
At the school he's going to be playing his next 4 years at.
They grow up so fast,
So Julian Lewis, they do grow up so fast. And recruitments come at you very fast, too. That's why this one kind of just ratcheted up on a drop of a dime, because it became real. It became, hey, am I really going to USC? Am I going to go check out other schools? The answer is yes. Julian Lewis visited Colorado, visited Georgia, tried to get to Alabama. I believe he still will get to Alabama, visited Auburn. He's looking around. He says, I want to close this thing out. I don't know what exactly that means, but to me, if you're already committed and you're saying, I'm going to take a few trips and then close this thing out, I think he's going to flip.
Yeah.
He hasn't said that. I just think the writing on the wall, he committed. He's from Carrollton, Georgia.
Yep.
He committed early to USC. And don't cry for Lincoln Riley. Lincoln Riley will still get his guy, whether it's Julian Lewis or somebody else. Lincoln Riley will get his quarterback. But I just think that when it becomes real, I think you start looking a little bit closer to home. And that's what Julian Lewis is doing. So he thinks he's going to work through this fairly quickly and come to I don't want to put words in his mouth, a final decision, but ultimately, I mean, he is coming to a final decision.
That's kind of the way it's shaping up. And the thing that's so interesting about this, like, if we rewind the tape another year back and kind of think about the way that Lincoln Riley's been perceived, and honestly still is perceived, like, he is the quarterback guru in college football. Not that there's other good people with the quarterback position.
But he has that designation right now.
Totally. And for Julian Lewis to be like, I could go play for him, or I could go to Georgia, or insert whatever other school you want to talk about there. Just kind of a wild time in college football, kind of a wild time in recruiting that we're talking about Lincoln Riley potentially not hanging on to one of the top recruits. Now, that hasn't happened yet.
And it shows how valued Julian Lewis is, and how much leverage he has in this situation. He can openly say, I'm looking into some things. And Lincoln Riley can't say anything about it. It speaks to the talent that Julian Lewis is.
The whole thing is very interesting, and obviously we'll track it all the way through the whistle, all the way through the first, second signing period and beyond. I mean, that's what we do here on the On3 YouTube channel, the On3 Recruits channel as well.
I mean, Julian saying put the pads on.
Julian saying put the pads on, put the cleats on, was out there running around during Rose Bowl practice. Like, we got Jalen Monroe answering questions about Julian saying, and then eventually
he goes to Ohio State.
Short-term signee style, which kind of leads perfectly into this last moment of this show, Josh. 2024, putting it to bed, tucking it in, making sure it's comfortable. last take, last thought, last takeaway on this 2024 class before we jump into 2025 officially?
The QB shuffle. Yep. With Dylan Raiola, I think this class, to me, will be remembered for Dylan Raiola not only leaving his commitment to Ohio State. That was a year ago this time. Dylan Raiola was just decommitting from Ohio State, commits to Georgia, then to Nebraska, and then you have Julian Sayin transferring. At one time, they were the number 1 and 2 QBs in the country. I mean, now DJ Lagway is number 1, and deservedly so. But at one point, the number 1 and 2 QBs in the country had a very dramatic time in their recruitment.
It is a crazy time.
Some of them had multiple dramatic periods.
Last take I'll give here, or last thought on this cycle. I'm curious to see how much of this is a trend going forward with the players after signing a letter of intent, after being on campus, ending up having that short-term signee thing. I think that's going to happen more and more in college football, but I'm not sure if we'll see it as frequently as we did this season because of the generational moment that was Nick Saban retiring. I mean, that was a thing that obviously shook the college football landscape, from the head coaching carousel, which by way of a trickle-down effect impacted kids that had already committed and that were signed, and making moves from a transfer portal perspective. All that's to say, I'm really fascinated to watch how that evolves over time. Short-term signee is here to stay without question, but will we see this kind of ripple effect in the future? I don't know.
The start of this cycle, we didn't even know the term short-term signee, or even it wasn't in our vernacular at all. And I think next year at this time, when we say STS, everybody watching will know the acronym STS, because I think it'll be that ingrained in the recruiting cycle, because I don't see the transfer portal slowing down. I don't see coaches leaving slowing down. So I think this new designation of short-term signee is here to stay.
Yeah, brand new verbiage for the lexicon. Well, for all of us here at On 3, for myself, for Josh Newberg, for Nick Brake producing the show, we appreciate y'all rolling with us. Again, make sure you're locked in at the On 3 Recruits channel. Tons of content year-round, college football recruiting centric. You don't want to miss any of it. We appreciate y'all. We love y'all. Going to keep this party rolling, and we will see y'all next time.